Howdy, folks. Today I want to talk a little bit about this article that I came across the other day, Why I'm Going Back to PHP in 2025, and no, I'm not joking, by Devrim Oz-K. This is a really interesting article for a number of reasons. I don't fully agree with all of it, okay, just to get that off the bat, but there are a lot of interesting points here that I do agree with, so I want to go through it. Um, It's 11:47 p.m. on Tuesday. I just deployed a complete CRUD app with auth, email notifications, background jobs, total time 3 hours, framework Laravel. My Node.js colleague is still debugging his callback hell from last week. So this off the bat, I already think is a little disingenuous because, yeah, Laravel will do all that stuff. I haven't worked with it very much, but I know it's a very powerful framework, right? Callback hells in Node.js, if you're really like experienced with Node.js to the point of a mid-level software engineer, you're not going to be debugging callback hells for a week. I think that anyone with a serious amount of experience, if you're able to do all this auth, email notifications, background jobs, do it well in 3 hours with one framework, you're pretty experienced with Laravel and PHP. Like you're not a noob. If I was to start doing this, it'd take me more than 3 hours, right? Because I don't know Laravel that well. So if you're at the same level of experience with Node.js, it's not going to be taking you this long unless you have a really, really complicated application, in which case Laravel is also going to be complicated, right? So I feel like I would really question this a little bit because also we don't know, is this Node.js colleague a junior engineer and this person senior? That might make some difference too. Okay, thank you. PHP is better than whatever new JavaScript framework you learned last month. I am a big fan of PHP, right? I don't completely agree with this. I do agree JavaScript has a big problem with frameworks and trends, right? So there's a big issue with JavaScript where it's just like, oh my gosh, you've got this brand new framework. Look, it does this X. It's like React, but better. And I think that is a big problem. PHP has remained a very PHP code that I wrote 20 years ago will still run. JavaScript code that I wrote 10, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, no, definitely not. Not a chance. Not a chance it's going to work. And that's even before modules, right? If you wrote something with modules in JavaScript, it's got a shelf life of like maybe 2 years before you need to change stuff, right? This is kind of funny. Ban me from our programming, revoke my developer card, I don't care anymore. There is a big issue in tech about people being like, oh, you like this language, that means that you're a noob, right? They're very, I can't say I've come across a language that I thought was bad, right? I think if you are someone or you come across someone that says this language is bad and useless, unless it's something meant to be bad and useless, like brainfuck or something like that, that is actually a bad language, but it's designed that way, right? It's specifically designed to be bad. No language that is used by a large group of people is bad at everything. JavaScript is really great in the browser. JavaScript is really shit on the server. I am firmly in that camp. Do I do JavaScript on the server? Absolutely. I've been doing that for a very long time, actually. But I don't think it's a good thing. PHP, I think, is really good for simple websites on the server. I think it starts to fall apart once you start getting really, really big systems, right? Each language really good for one thing, not so good for other things. It really depends. But there are a lot of people, especially in r/programming, which, to be honest, is a lot of junior engineers and a lot of mid-level engineers. They're just going with trend of the week, right? I learned JavaScript. I didn't learn PHP. Everyone's hating on PHP. I can hate it too. Everyone hates on JavaScript. I can hate it too. Rust is a new thing, right? I don't care. This is how most senior engineers look at that stuff. If someone has an opinion on r/programming, like, okay. I've been the modern stack guy, Node.js, TypeScript enthusiast, microservices architect. This is kind of funny. I've written more async await than most people have written console log. I'm exhausted. Okay. I believe that. Yeah. All the buzzwords. Event. See, this is the thing. I read a blog post titled Why Your Company Should Switch. Any blog post like this is bullshit. Anything it's like your company, your whole company should move to this platform. No, it's bullshit. Even if it's a real thing, it's terrible. Non-blocking I/O, event-driven architecture, JavaScript everywhere, stability, performance. I actually read the same stuff when I was learning about Node. Nobody cares about this. Any decent server you work with handles this for you, right? We're not working in C++ anymore. Event-driven architecture, again, this is a server. Servers don't need event-driven architecture. You might be looking at this and like, well, isn't it's an event? Something comes in and it's an event. Yeah, sure. But that's not the only thing a server does. Servers also run background tasks. They run job processing. They may actually return to the user and open up a stream. They may have a WebSocket with that user, right? Servers, a lot of web servers, yes, if you've got a simple website like this website here, this Stackademic website, probably would run fine in Node.js because it is event driven, right? I scroll, that's an event. I do this, that's an event. 3 seconds pass, that's an event. Not a lot is happening right now. In fact, I've been on this one screen just talking. The server doesn't need to be doing anything while this is going on. You start building SaaS, you start building any larger application, no, you need more than events. JavaScript everywhere, again, not a good thing. JavaScript, I love it. One of my favorite languages. I don't think it belongs in the server. I just don't think it does. It's single-threaded, for one. I mean, yes, you can use CPU workers to do multi-threading. You can run more than one node instance, but the node process itself just isn't built with that in mind. And so most modules are not built with that in mind, whereas you get something like Java, for instance, it's built with that concept in mind, which means it's just a better language for it. Scalability, not really. Node doesn't scale that well. As again, like let's say I need suddenly 4 times the capacity. What do? I have to spin up 4 node instances. Whereas another server that is designed for the backend will just be able to multi-thread it, right? Apache can scale up to like 200 threads, and then you just get a bigger computer, right? And you can do stuff on top of that and say, oh, you use load balancer, you use all that stuff. Yeah, but that stuff works with every server. It's not just a node thing. And performance. Node's performance is okay, but it's JavaScript. It's just like PHP, to be honest. It's not going to be that performative. These are interpreted languages, and you can write WebAssembly with Node. People don't do that. It's just an added layer of complexity bullshit. You know what you could do if you really care about performance? Again, use something like Rust or C++ or Java, which are compiled languages. They are going to run faster. Rust and C++ are going to run a million times faster than Node. And the thing is, if you are at the point where you need that kind of performance, you really should be hiring people that specifically know how to work in those languages. You shouldn't be saying, oh, we need a huge performance boost. We're going to rewrite this in Node.js. Nobody who has ever had a successful company has said something like that. That's just not what happens. Most people, they move to, and also microservices. That's another thing that's being conflated here, okay? Laravel monolith to Node.js microservices. Monolith and microservices are a fully separate concept. You can run a Node.js monolith. You can run PHP microservices. The microservice, which is monolith, has very little to do with your language choice. It has to do with how you split your pieces apart. So that's a little bit of an unfair comparison, I think, because not only did they change languages, they changed structures. And we migrated our Laravel monolith. For one, the fact that one person was sold, and this company migrated, just because this one person was sold tells me it was a very small company. Very small. Probably like 3 or 4 engineers, right? And I bet none of them knew Node.js that well. Also, the funny thing is, this person was sold, but then also up here, my Node.js colleague. If you're the one that made the decision to switch from Laravel to Node.js, wouldn't you be the Node.js colleague? That's just kind of interesting to me. Like this, it feels like, I know I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but it really feels like this person made a switch to Node.js, dropped it later on, made someone else maintain it because they didn't like it anymore. That's fine. Like, I'm actually not throwing shade on that because I do that shit all the time too. But also, this is why you don't do this. You don't read a blog post and migrate your whole thing just because it looks cool. You start a greenfield project with it. You leave your legacy code, you keep it there because you know what? It probably works. It's probably running. And then you do a greenfield project. Okay. Anyway, so no one who actually had to maintain it. I absolutely agree. JavaScript is much harder to maintain than PHP. Much harder. Granted, personally, I don't have a problem maintaining either one, but that's because I have like 20 years of experience with both languages and systems. So I could see for a junior or mid-level engineer, PHP is much more straightforward. Why? Because it's built. It's built for beginner engineers. It also gives you the ability to shoot your foot off, but Node does as well. Okay. The Node.js honeymoon period is amazing. Look how fast it is. Taking 4 minutes. This is so real. God, this is so real. This is legitimately why I use PNPM instead of NPM, because it's absolutely ridiculous, right? Why are there 40? This is also completely true. I mean, there's like 4 ways to handle async errors, but it's so true because frameworks shift. Like back in the day, Node didn't even have promises. It didn't even have async. They were all, or I mean, it did, but they were all callbacks, right? So we actually have modules like Bluebird that did promises for us. Then JavaScript added it. Okay, so then Node supported it. So now you've got modules that just assume there are promises, right? Then async await came about, and that's using try catch. So you've got all these different things that some of them are using promise.catch.then, some of them are using a try catch, some of them aren't doing anything at all. Some of them are just using an error callback. It's a mess, man. It really is a mess. And this is, again, why Greenfield project. And use PNPM. It's gotten better, to be honest. But yeah, NPM installs taking like 16, 17 minutes is just, it's obscene. It's a problem. And it's because there's no standardization. Whenever you install a package, Node or NPM will automatically run whatever scripts it says to run. So if you are installing something that pulls in 10,000 packages, which is not unheard of, okay? Not at all unheard of for a big application, you may be there for a long time. In fact, I've been at places that literally just have Docker containers that just contain the dependencies pre-installed just so that we don't have to have 30 minutes of installation. This is also really funny. Like this, I feel like is less of an issue. Like Express, I would have used something a little different for this, but because Express, and I can tell you, I've been using Express for like maybe 6 years at this point, hasn't changed that much. Granted, there are little chunks of things like the little nitty gritty that's changed, but Express is so bare bones, which is honestly one of the things I kind of love about it. It really hasn't changed in 6 years. Like, so it doesn't really matter for that. Like if you're writing code, which version of Express you're using, what it does matter for is dependencies. Because you will get a library and you'll say, oh my God, this does WebSockets exactly how we want. If you're doing WebSockets in Node, you probably shouldn't be, but you know, it works. And then it says, oh, this only works at Express 5 and you're using Express 4. You don't care, right? Because the code you're writing is the same, but that module needs to hook into certain system libraries that don't exist in 4. That's when it can be a problem. And you get this dependency hell where stuff in between different modules, it's just kind of almost kind of like a dance trying to get it all to work, and it really is a pain. Who wrote this callback period? Why is an error? That's, yeah, also very true. Also very true. You will and as they talk about later here, Node is not very helpful in telling you where the issue actually is. You have to actually specifically write your own tracing code essentially to make sure that you're catching errors. Like if you catch an error and you rethrow that error, you've lost the stack trace. That's just sometimes how it works. Like you just lose that trace completely. It shouldn't work that way, but it does. But yeah, callback pyramids are terrible, but also at the same time, if you are anything less or more than like a beginner in JavaScript, you're not writing callback pyramids. I mean, granted, I still write callback pyramids in my personal projects, that's because I don't care about that code. There are so many ways to avoid it, even if you're not using async await. It's just, this again Don't switch to something that none of your engineers really know how to use. Don't migrate everything over to it. Use a greenfield project so you can figure out the issues and maybe hire someone who is really experienced with this thing. You know? Okay. I want to go back to one thing I failed. Yeah, that's a thing. And especially if you've, the sunk cost fallacy is very real in engineering. Because we'll say, well, we spent a whole year on this. Why do we have to rewrite it? Well, because it sucks. It sucks. And the problem is because that's a pushback against people who come into code they don't understand and say, I need to rewrite all of this because I don't understand it. So, you know, one side, the other side. If you're saying, hey, if you come into a company, right, and you've been there for 2 weeks and you're already telling them we need to rewrite all this code, I promise you everyone else on your team hates you because you should not be doing that. You have no idea what you're doing. If you've been there for 6 months and you're saying, I think we might need to rewrite this, that might have a little bit more weight to it. But that's why people are saying, why do we need to rewrite this? Or let's stick with what we have, because there are so many people that just show up, say, let's rewrite everything just because I don't understand the libraries being used. Bothers me. Okay. Liza tells us about modern stacks, modern JavaScript, right? It's faster. Is it though? See, this is really funny. My Laravel API, 50 cents, 0 configuration. I don't believe this. I mean, the thing is, I guess what's a little disingenuous about this is 6 hours of optimization, 3 npm package caching, 1 existential crisis. If you're doing something that works in Laravel with 0 configuration, I promise you there's also a way to do it in Express with 0 configuration. Right? So I don't believe this comparison. Like if you're taking 6 hours of optimizing your Node.js API and all that stuff, I don't believe that Laravel just magically did all that for you. Because if Laravel magically just did all that for you with no config, 0, meaning no lines of config, you didn't even tell it where your database was, you know, like that means that what you're building is so simple that you probably could have just installed a specific node package that did it for you, right? I do agree that this shit is a pain in the ass. But I've also had to deal with that in Python, or not Python, PHP too. So, you know, you say 15, this is true. Your users can't tell the difference. That is, I agree with that 100%. Don't be optimizing for 10 milliseconds. Optimize for maybe 100. That might be valuable. Maybe 200, but yeah, if it's that close, don't worry about it. I 100% agree with this. This whole thing, I 100% agree with this. Yeah. When we began this whole node thing, the thing that people were talking about, something I was very excited about as well, was people saying, hey, look, we can share code. We can share code between the front end and back end. Won't that be amazing? And you know what? It was exciting, but I have run into so few cases where that was actually useful. And honestly, because of the way these systems work, up until recently, okay, Node was entirely using require.js. CommonJS? ESM? I don't know what the names are, man. There's ESM, there's CommonJS, there's require.js, whatever. It was like var blah equals require file, okay? And all the front end stuff was using import blah from and export, okay? Those systems were completely incompatible. So you actually couldn't use the code in both places unless you jump through a bunch of hoops. That has changed. TypeScript uses import. Node actually does support import now if you put it in ESM mode. So that actually works pretty well. But it's still not that useful. There's very few things. I will say I just wrote a project where there's a ton of server code that I am actually using in the client. But that's because I got lazy and I said, I don't want to rewrite all my crap for a tutorial. Let me just pull the entire game system into the client, right? It works. It works actually pretty well. But like, I didn't have to do it that way. There are other ways of doing that. So yeah, PHP does one thing, does it well. That's actually not completely true. PHP does try to do jack of all trades for the backend, okay? That's why we have 3 ways of connecting to a database. PHP does a lot of things, but it also is really backend. There's not packages to make PHP run on the front end. When we did do PHP on the front end, or like front end stuff, it wasn't we running PHP. We were using the PHP on the back end to generate the front end, which is very different. Also true. how many building real-time apps using WebSockets? PHP had those. See, the thing about this too is when they're talking about Laravel and WebSockets, they're not talking about standard Apache PHP. Because Apache-based PHP doesn't really have WebSockets or server-side events or any of that stuff, right? It is actually, you get a request in, you send data out, connection's done. They're talking about actually running a server, probably a Laravel server, similar to how you run a node server on a dedicated VPN or something like that. VPS? VPN? VPS. So yeah, PHP has WebSockets. It'll handle the same thing. Pulling server-sent events. Server-sent events are pretty cool. PHP has those, right? This is funny. Go use Java or C++. Okay, go use Java. I love Java. Java's great. I don't really understand why people stop using it in the backend. It's a great language. It is over 30 years of just core support for enterprise grade backend applications. That is Java. You know, it's like, oh, there's a lot of setup. You have AI. Ask whatever you're using, Cursor, or what is the GitHub one? Copilot. Ask Copilot to set up your basic Java app using Spring or Glassfish. What are they using these days? Glassfish is what I used last, but that was like many years ago. Anyway, yeah, go use Java. Java's great. The rest of us are building CRUD apps with auth. Yes, CRUD apps with auth. Very easy, very simple. You don't need to do that much with it. It needs to keep track of some data, right? It's doing CRUD. It's doing create, read, update, delete. When the user asks for it. It doesn't need to be doing it much most of the time. I would even argue with that particular thing, don't even use Laravel. Hook up freaking Apache to PHP, and it's not even that freaking much boilerplate to do this stuff, right? If you're doing Node.js, we know you love boilerplate and setup because that's the whole point of Express is there's nothing there. That's one of the things I love about Express. You can do whatever you want. PHP, it's even more. You don't even have a web server for Apache-based PHP. I mean, you do, it's Apache, but you don't really need to pay attention to it. It's a CRUD app. It's very simple to set up. You set up for like on a $4 a month web host. This is the greatest thing ever. Somewhere in one of our 23 microservices, someone forgot to handle an async error. And what that means is they never caught the error. And Node has this issue where if it gets an uncaught error, it just spews it out to the console, which is really what it should do. Actually, nowadays, I think it just crashes. I think it actually just turns off, which is why production was down. So that is the thing. You do have to deal with that. I would say PHP has these issues too, honestly. But the issue with this, how long to fix, right? We don't know. We had check logs across 23 services. That's the thing. You have no idea where the hell this is. Now, on the other hand, if I had 23 PHP microservices, you might end up with the same issue, not necessarily just because you get this error. And to be perfectly honest, if you get this error and your logging system didn't tell you which microservice this came from, that's a problem with how you set up your microservices. When I worked at companies that had microservices, we would get errors like this. But the error itself knew what service it came from because it knew what it was supposed to be. Like when you started it up, there was an environment variable telling it you are this type of service. So the error system in general was able to say, I am from the logging service, or I am from the user sign-in service. The fact that they didn't know where this came from, that speaks to me that they don't have a very robust logging system. And that is a microservices problem, not a language problem. Looked at my Laravel backup project, one I built just for fun that did the same thing. Yeah, it had one service. Now, you note also there, this was a monolith. They built a Laravel monolith. I bet they could have also built a JavaScript monolith. So I know I keep harping on this point, but I really want to stress that monolith versus microservice, and I'm a big fan of monoliths, by the way. I'm not a fan of microservice. I think they're just too much work. Monolith versus microservice is a completely different thing from which language you're using. Now, microservices allow you to use different languages, so you could have had a bunch of stuff in Laravel using PHP and some stuff in JavaScript and some stuff in Java. It lets you just do that. And it also is really nice for switching stuff over time. Clear error logs, yes. PHP has this. I don't know what this is, but I guess it's a Laravel thing. I shipped the fix in 14 minutes using Laravel. Now, what they meant with this, I think, is that they actually just took down their entire production and started it back up with their Laravel backup project. That is dangerous. Unless I would say I wouldn't do that personally, unless I knew I was at a very small startup that nobody was using anyway. But of course, if no one was using it anyway, then it's not a big deal that production's down. If you actually shipped your backup project, I don't know who has reviewed that code, right? That's kind of the danger. Even if you're on a team of 5 people, you think you know everything your system does? Probably not. I pride myself on knowing everything my systems do, and I'm still surprised all the time with stuff. So I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't take down the unless it was already running, right? So maybe it was already running and like there was a load balancer that was going to 15 different node projects and one Laravel project. In that case, fine. You've been stress testing it, but like if it does the same thing, you built it for fun. If unless you are very, very sure that you've stress tested this thing and it actually can handle your customer data, I think it'd be more important to figure out your existing production code that you know works and like figure out why that's working. The Node version took 6 hours because I had to coordinate across services. Oh no. That's kind of how long this stuff takes. I've been in incidents that have taken 3 days to figure out what was going wrong. And yes, production was down during that time. That's kind of what happens. Like 6 hours is actually not that big of a deal. Coordinate across services, yes. But again, that's a microservices thing. Update. Yeah, this is a pain in the ass. Though, that also makes me think that someone is not doing TypeScript very well. Because either you updated 4 TypeScript interfaces, in which case, okay, that's not the biggest deal. Or you had 4 of the same interface that you had to update. And that's a misuse of TypeScript. And yeah, this is a pain in the ass. Absolutely, 100% agree with that. Big pain in the ass. But PHP is slow. No, it's not that slow. Yeah, I don't think PHP is actually that slow. It's made great strides. Ecosystem. Yeah, see, and this is the other thing. I don't like built-ins. I don't like built-ins at all. The reason is they become opinionated. If I want my queue to work in a slightly different way, and what'll happen is if you go to these frameworks and you say, hey, look, I'm trying to accomplish X. They'll tell you, oh, just don't do X. Well, that's not really your call, buddy. Sometimes I have to do X. Sometimes the system that I'm working on just requires me to do it that way. And that's just life, okay? So I don't know. Again, I haven't worked very much with Laravel, but the fact that all of this stuff is built in like this worries me. Because granted, if I'm using a web server in Node, I'm going to use Express, right? But I also could write my own. If I'm using a cron scheduler, I could use Node cron, but I also could do my own, and it wouldn't be too hard to do, or I could use another one that someone else built. If Laravel has all this stuff, it means that the community has no incentive to build their own because they'd rather just kind of try to figure out how to make the existing stuff work. And that's great if the existing stuff is good, but I can promise you, even on really, really big systems like TypeScript, for instance, which is a Microsoft product, or React, which is a Facebook product, shit goes wrong, and things sometimes don't work the way you'd like them to, and things sometimes change just because the corporate overlords or the big, okay, not just corporate overlords, or, the big person who's in charge of the open source project, they just decide they want to do it differently. And you're kind of up the creek at that point, unless you can modularize your own stuff. And that's what I like about the Express ecosystem. They don't give a shit. Like, here, we're going to give you a framework. Same thing with React. They do so little for you. And a lot of people complain about that, but that means that you can choose. I don't like systems like this that probably very likely don't let you choose. And it don't let you choose because you just are prevented from building others. But if I'm going to the Laravel and I don't like how their cron works, I'm going to look up a different cron, and probably no one else has built one because they're just using the Laravel cron. Which means I have to learn way more about cron than I wanted to get something working. See? This is cool, though. Node has, yes, and this is I think this is good, right? I think this is great because you can choose. I used to use Mocha for the longest time, and then I learned Jest, right? What if I didn't have that option? What if the only option I had to improve something was to ask the maintainers of Laravel to update it? Or what if Node.js came with its own testing system and I had to ask them to improve it? No, that is the double-edged sword of the Node world. There is a module for everything, right? Everything, completely. And there are also modules that don't work the way you want to work, and there are modules that do, which means that you get to choose. You have that freedom of choice. Now, here's the thing. I'm a senior engineer. If you're a junior engineer, you're a mid-level engineer even, you don't want to have to choose this. You're already trying to figure out just how to write the algorithm. You're just trying to remember, how is this if statement correct, right? You're not thinking, oh, well, I went with this particular queuing library last time, but it didn't work so well. Let me try this other one, or let me see this. I get that. I absolutely get that. The thing is, we don't build libraries and frameworks for junior engineers. Reason is, junior engineers don't stay junior engineers for very long. Right? So I've been a junior engineer for 2 to 3 years. Yeah, that's how long you're going to be a junior engineer. It's for a couple of years. I've been a senior engineer for 20 years. Okay? 20 years. That's not fair. I've been a programmer for 20 years. I've been a senior engineer for 15 of those. I've been a senior engineer longer than I've been anything else, which means that I don't want to be working with a library that holds my hand. I want to be working with a library that gives me power. And I don't mind if there's some razor blades in there. I've cut myself before, and I will do it again. That's just part of the learning experience. I want that power and flexibility because I know that 95% of the time, whatever this framework gives me is going to be great. I'm not worried about that. It's the other 5% that I'm worried about. And the other 5% where I just need to do something weird. Why do I need to do something weird? Doesn't matter. Maybe I'm working with a legacy framework I can't change. Maybe I'm working with a data structure that's just odd. Maybe the last person that wrote this code didn't know what they were doing. Maybe that person was me, right? And maybe I just don't have time to spend the 3 months to rewrite it. Maybe I just need to do something oddly. And if you ask people about this on Stack Overflow or all these other places, they'll say, just don't do it that way. Yeah, but now it's been done that way and I'm the one dealing with that, right? I need to be able to get into the system and mess with it. That's why I like React. That's why I like Express. That's why I like PHP in the raw. Because you can do anything you want. And most of the time you won't have to, but you can if you need to. And I have gotten myself out of so many situations just because I was able to fix something and then come back to it a couple months later. Yes, we sometimes do actually do that. However, pray it's maintained. This is a big problem with Node. Big problem in the NPM ecosystem. I have myself about 12, 13 packages in NPM. There are a couple of those that I haven't touched in 4 years, and I really hope no one else is using them because they're terribly out of date. You know, I don't need them anymore, so I'm not maintaining them. And that is the problem, especially if it's the only module that does what you need, right? On the other hand, one of the beautiful things about this stuff is that it's all just code. If you need to, you could probably figure out how it works and do it yourself. Granted, do you want to do that with an open source library? No. But queuing is not that difficult. Email, not that difficult. Like if I needed to, I could probably actually write a system to send email. Would it be great? No, but it would work. I've actually done this in Perl before, just actually sending stuff straight into the sendmail daemon. On the other hand, you have Copilot. Just you could tell Copilot, rewrite my queue system to use this module instead, and it'll do it. It's not that big of a deal. File storage, what does that even mean? Like storing data into files? Yeah, Node doesn't have that by default because Node is a bare bones system. PHP is a kitchen sink included. One of the reasons I love PHP. But I promise you there's probably at least, again, 47 modules that do file storage. Testing? Yeah. Mocha was kind of a pain because you had to use Chai and you had to use a bunch of other stuff. Jest is actually really fun, but you know why Jest exists? Because someone got annoyed with Mocha and wrote their own library and said, I can do better. Imagine if you couldn't do that because it was built in. Okay, ship faster, time to complete feature in Laravel, generate model, write my... This is the fun part. Generate model, okay. Write migration. You're telling me update controller tested PHP. You're telling me you did that in 30 minutes? That's a very simple model. Complete feature. What is this feature? Feature to do what? You're telling me you're writing a full feature in 30 minutes? I don't believe that. I don't believe you, because that means I have someone who is experienced enough to write code that quickly and have it actually work is experienced enough to know why a lot of the reasons this person is upset with Node are bullshit, and to know the difference between microservices and monoliths. Okay, like that's kind of what bothers me about this. I'm like, you're not doing this in 30 minutes. Also, time to build a scene feature node. Choose ORM. Are we building a feature or are we building a product here? A project. Because if you're building a feature, your ORM was already picked. Okay. Also Prisma. Prisma's great. Are we talking by feature they mean entire project? In that case, I believe this even less. Because you're telling me there's one model in your project, that's a pretty small project. In which case in Node, you wouldn't even need an ORM. You just use like MySQL 2. Set up types. Okay, we're using TypeScript. Sure. It's not going to take that long. Write model. It doesn't take that much work to write a model. Like SQLized models, you can write those pretty quickly if you know your data types. Why wasn't this step in here in Laravel? You're telling me Laravel completely forces you to have every single folder the same name? I hate that. I hate that because I'm not going to like what it came up with in some cases. So we assume you have a team. You have a team. And somehow you got this done in 30 minutes? You did not get this done in 30 minutes if you have a whole team. Okay? Not a chance. Also, if you're debating the folder structure with the team, that's part of the technical spec. We're assuming if we have a team here and we're at this point, then your team has already talked about the technical spec and they've agreed on what the table should be and what it's got. The folder structure is part of that discussion. So that's not in here. So then it shouldn't be in here. Set up testing. Use Jest. Don't use vtest. I'm kidding. Use whatever you want, but that's not a big deal. Setting up a Jest test is fucking easy. I have used PHP Unit and Jest, and I can tell you PHP Unit is actually a lot harder to do injection and stuff like that. Jest is great for it because of the way Node does its module caching. PHP Unit's a little harder. Debate if we should use classes or functions. You said you're using types. That means you're using classes because you're using TypeScript, and TypeScript has good class support. If you're using Java or JavaScript without TypeScript, I agree. This is a pain in the ass. The JavaScript classes are terrible. Update 6 TypeScript interfaces because you changed a property name. Again, if you're doing that, you're writing your TypeScript interfaces wrong. TypeScript has great inheritance and what's the term? What is the term? I forget exactly. It's not encapsulation. Composition. Composition, where you take one thing and make it out of two other things. TypeScript's great for that. So you could have done all that stuff amazingly, you know? So to be fair, I'm gonna agree. These are fewer steps. This is more steps, though I don't think you need this one. And I don't think you need this one if you know what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, then none of this applies anyway, because you don't know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, then you shouldn't be having opinions on frameworks because they are not written for you. If you are a junior engineer, frameworks are not written for you. I know that is harsh. I know that's a problem, but they are written for people who have a lot of experience to get things done very quickly, which is kind of what this is about, right? This whole post. They're arguing Laravel is that thing. The error messages don't lie. Oh my God, so true. PHP has so much better error messages because it gives you the entire trace. It tells you exactly where stuff is. Whereas Node, yeah. What is this? This is ridiculous. Now, to be fair, this is not the entire stack trace. You would get more, but a lot of that's deep in your modules, and it's not helpful at all. I am 100% on board with this. Error messages in PHP, so much better. I'm not finding tools. Install Laravel, start cutting the Yeah. Yeah, choose which bundler. V. You want to use V. But Yeah, you can choose. Configure TypeScript. Sure, it doesn't take that long. Add the ESLint. You don't have to do this. Configure print. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do any of these things at all. This is optional. Completely. I hate Prettier, actually. I don't use ESLint or Prettier. You don't need to do that. Add nodemon. This takes literally 2 minutes. It is npm install nodemon, and then you just pop it in the front of your command. It's not that hard. Configure paths. What paths? Start coding. Finally. No. What? You would be coding while you're doing all this, like a true engineer. You wouldn't set all your stuff up first. No one does that. You have to go back and change it and waste 30 minutes later. That's how engineers do stuff. But yes, true. Rebuild no modules. True. Yeah. I agree with these completely, this part. This, you don't need to do this. This is not a big deal. Make your free. The last time I did a project, I just made the AI do this. It was great. Initialize npm. This also takes like 3 seconds. Literally, if you just say npm init-y, that's it. It just creates the package log. It doesn't say, it sets the version to 0.1. It doesn't put an author. It doesn't put a package name. You probably don't need that stuff anyway. This is not a big deal. Choose a bundler. If you don't have an opinion on what bundler you're using, you should do some research on that. Yeah, but it's also great that we have options. You know? I agree with this though. This is I don't think I agree with this statement because nothing just works. But Laravel with the kitchen sink included stuff, which is a very PHP thing, by the way. Yeah, it's got the bundler for you. It's got probably linting built in. It's got dependency stuff. I agree with that, but I do think that this is disingenuous because these steps are not as complicated as you'd think. Laravel deploy. Composer install. Yeah, Composer is actually pretty cool. I like Composer. Migrate and optimize. Okay. No, build TypeScript. Hope the build succeeds. True. Hope all your imports are correct. True. Handle different module systems. This is not part of the deploy. Not at all. If this is part of your development process. Pray pure dependencies resolved. This is also part of your development process. Right, yes, this is actually true, but also I can tell you this is with every language and every system. That is just true. You realize that is a distinctly Node thing, and it is really funny when this happens. I mean, funny after the fact. It's not funny when you have to deal with it. But yeah, I 100%. No, this is not usually part of a Node deploy. Yo, wait, this is actually, I love this section so much. This is the truest thing I've ever read. How much it? Less than 100 requests a day? Laravel 100. Yeah, PHP is great for that. Less than 1 million requests a day? Redis load balancer. 10 million? Yeah, absolutely. Stop optimizing for scale you don't have. Facebook started on PHP. Facebook, and the reason there's actually a specific reason why they picked Facebook here. Most enterprise companies, or most companies at the time that PHP was popular, the flow became start on PHP. Once you get to the point where you realize you need to actually work, migrate to Java. You rewrote your system in Java. That's what you did. Facebook is notably different in that they started on PHP, and when they got to the point where they were like, shit, this isn't going to work, they wrote a new language called Hack that is based on PHP. And so PHP code will run in a Hack interpreter. It is typed. Actually, Hack is pretty nice. We used it at Slack. Facebook does not actually use Hack anymore because they've learned. What do they use now? They use Java and Rust and C++ and probably still a little bit of Hack, right? But that's why that example is there. But yeah, everyone starts on PHP. Everyone starts in JavaScript. The companies that make it big move away from those things pretty quickly if they're smart. WordPress runs 40%. Absolutely true. This doesn't need microservices. Yeah, I agree. You don't need microservices. You generally don't need microservices. Just in general. Yeah. I also agree 100% with this. Bad database queries, no caching, too many API calls, slow front. Yeah. That's funny. No CDN. Yeah. No, it's true. I will say though, PHP is slower in other languages. JavaScript is slower in other languages because they're interpreted, not compiled. Even Python is faster because it does get compiled. Java compiled, C++ compiled, Rust compiled, Go compiled, right? But this is one of the bigger issues. Not to say you can't screw something up with this. And it is actually easier to screw up performance stuff in JavaScript because of the way asynchronicity works and people who don't understand that sometimes. I don't understand it sometimes. Yeah, but I will agree with this. Like most of the time, unless you're really, as long as you're following good practices, it's usually not the language. I also kind of disagree with this. Laravel, right? Minimalist framework, bring your own tools. This is what we like about Express. That is the thing I think people don't get. The people who use Express, if you don't want something that's minimalist, you use Nest or you use Next or you use any of the other frameworks, which are kind of Laravel-like, right? Or you use Laravel. When I write PHP, I also don't use Laravel. I use a minimalist API routing framework that I write myself, and it's 30 lines of code. Because it doesn't have to be that much. The other ones say small made you do all the work. Yes, but the other stayed small and gave you the flexibility to do whatever you want. And again, if you are a senior engineer, that is what you want. We value flexibility over a toolkit that's full of tools because we know how to make our own damn tools if we need to. We know how to make a weird little tool that does nothing but work for this particular thing. I've done this. Like, yeah, it's content migration, queues, authentication, all this stuff. I don't want all this stuff because one, I don't need 90% of this stuff probably. And if I do need it, I want to have a lot of control about it. All right. Callback held, yes. No module, yes. Absolutely. Dependency held, absolutely. Totally agree with this. Totally agree with this. This I agree with less because honestly, teams do this in every language. It is a thing that Node works, but PHP also has this. Java also has this, you know. Yes, agree. Also agree. They totally agree with most of this, right? Hello, I mean, back things just work. Again, I don't believe that. One composer JSON versus the thing that's funny about this is I could just say one package JSON as well. What do you put in that composer JSON, right? You're probably not putting as many packages, but that doesn't. This comparison doesn't make sense to me. Agree? I think that's more how you were writing your migrations, right? Migrations can be written badly regardless. Yeah, built-in testing is nice. And this is the kicker, right? Remember what I was saying. I can onboard a junior dev in one day, not 1 week. What's wrong with it taking a week to onboard a junior dev? There's nothing wrong with that. Is your junior dev going to quit in a month? Is that why you're worried about onboarding them in a day? If your app is such that you can onboard a junior dev in a day, you probably have a pretty simple app. You know? Like, I feel like if you are a decent senior engineer, taking a week or 2 weeks to onboard your junior dev just to kind of the piece of code that you work on and expecting questions from them for the next 2 years, that's normal. That's normal. I don't think I would want, if I can onboard a junior dev in 1 day, I'd be a little worried because I think, what am I missing? What have I not told this person? And this kind of goes into, I think the point they're trying to make here is Laravel takes care of everything. So you just tell them, oh, do this in Laravel. Well, the issue with that then is Laravel is what I like to call magic. Things just happen. You don't know how they happen. You don't know where they're happening. The reason that is important is because if they suddenly stop happening, where are you going to go to figure out why they stopped happening? You didn't even know why they were happening in the first place. You wrote Laravel init model, and now it's not working. Why? Why isn't it working? On the other hand, I can tell you in my Node.js code or my raw PHP code, right? This is not against Laravel in general. This is against frameworks that try to do everything for you. I have that problem too. I don't like frameworks that do everything, or I want to know how they did it, right? I want to be able to hook into that system because I don't trust them. They will break. I can tell you, I've been doing this for 2 decades. Every framework eventually breaks somewhere. And not even on purpose. Sometimes they just push a bug into that version. You didn't know about it. And now it's 2 major versions ahead, and now they're realizing it, and they got to fix it, but now you got to get production back up, right? That's kind of where you're at. And so we can't just rewrite our application in another language most of the time. If I can onboard someone so quickly, it means the framework is doing so much heavy lifting, and that makes me nervous. Because at some point it's going to stop working. You know, when it stops working, who's going to have to fix it? I am. Why? Because I'm the senior engineer. I would rather have a bunch of libraries and systems that do one thing. That's the Unix principle, remember? Do one thing, but do it well. Of course, Node takes that and they say do one thing and do it crappily, you know. But do one thing, do it well, and then I will stitch it together. Because then I know where stuff's happening. I know what it's doing, and I can swap them out if I need to, or I can rewrite them if I need to. I want that. I need that. Agree. Yep. This is not a big deal. People are like, oh, but the TypeScript compilation breaks. It broke because you did something wrong. That's the point of TypeScript. It's supposed to break when you did something wrong to let you know you did something wrong. If you don't like that, don't use TypeScript. I have written plenty of JavaScript code and not used TypeScript, and it's been fine. And then I've turned it into TypeScript, and I'm like, oh my God, this is all broken. Oh, this isn't actually a problem. It's just TypeScript thinks it is. That's the whole point of TypeScript. The compilation step is not that bad once you've had it set up, again, using AI. But if you've written your TypeScript and your code is bad, then don't you want to know about that? Assuming that because my deploys work, I do too, man. Like, yeah. Go. I've actually never used Go, but yeah, I've heard it's very fast. Python Django, yeah, Python Django is really slow. I don't know what this means. Rust, this is super funny. Also, good luck hiring Rust. It's true. There's very few people that do Rust. No, plus it's just Spring Boot for JavaScript. Why not use actual Spring Boot? I agree, right? I actually agree with this. Should use Node for real-time apps, microservices, streaming. I disagree with this. You know, serverless functions. Yes, very true. Because Node actually used beautifully for that. Yep. Agree with this. Totally agree with this. And I agree with almost 100% of this thing. Right? New isn't better. Modern is always better. JavaScript and backend is better. It's just newer. Not anymore, honestly. It's actually not that new. Yeah. Agree with this. You know, it's got a bunch of stuff. PHP's been around for forever. Yeah, I also agree. Yeah. Yeah, and also agree with this. This is also funny. This is also funny because this is the kind of blog I would have written when I was 27. When I thought I knew everything. Yeah. New microservices, greed. You don't need to learn Rust. You should, yeah. I totally agree with this. I totally agree with this. Not really. Like, once you configure Webpack 10 times, you can usually keep doing it. But I also agree with this. You know, try it for just one project. Don't migrate your production. Yeah, like you did. Like you did when you moved to Node. Legitimately. You literally did this. I guess that's how they know not to do it. Yeah, don't migrate your production app just because you read a blog post, okay? Honestly. Yes, it's true. It's true. It's also, I mean, this is also very Zen, right? Like, the only reason I'm doing a video about this is because I haven't done a video in 2 months, and I thought it was interesting, right? And also, I love giving people my opinion. But this, right? Like, the thing I'd say about this is use what you're comfortable with. Do you like Laravel? Use Laravel. Do you like Node? Use Node. Do you like Java? Use Java. Do you like Angular or Vue or V? Use those. Use what you want to use. Don't care about what everyone else is saying. Now, that doesn't mean you ignore them. Look at this. I'm gonna look at Laravel at some point. It's on my list. Right? I've been hearing about it for a long time. Use what you want to use and then build little sample projects to learn new things. Or what I do, join a company that's already using that thing, and then you'll be paid to learn it, which is great. Anyway, bunch of stuff here. But yeah, basically kind of my overall on this. My opinion I don't like one size fits all, kitchen sink included frameworks at all. They bother the hell out of me. I don't like Prettier because Prettier makes decisions about how your code is formatted. Like, I don't like things like Nest or Next. I don't like them actually. I don't like Angular because it bundles everything with it. I get a lot of people like those things. If you like those things, use them, right? But don't assume that just because someone else is using these things that they're doing it because they don't know a better way. I like Express. I like Express because it's very simple to use and I can write whatever the hell I want. And I've been doing this for 20 years, 24 actually. I know how to write whatever the hell I want, and most senior engineers will too. Okay? If you are a senior engineer, you're going to have your favorites. If you're a junior engineer, which is, and mid-level engineer, which is most of the people I'm doing these videos for, don't switch what you're doing just because someone wrote a blog about it. Try it out. See how you like it. If you like it, that's great. Just remember, every single framework and every single thing was written for some specific purpose. And if you're having a lot of trouble with it, you might be using it for not the purpose it's intended. And in that case, it's totally fine to use something else. But that doesn't mean the other people using it are wrong. That just means that they might have just figured out how to use it better than you. Yeah? I personally, I can probably take any one of the major languages that exists and make a SaaS product with it and make it successful. Not a problem. I'm not worried about framework. I'm not worried about database ORMs. I've written ORMs. I can do that work. I'm concerned if I pick up a framework, is it going to give me the flexibility and breathing room to do what I need to do? And more importantly, to get around it when it's being annoying. So that's what I'm really looking at when I'm doing this stuff. So, you know, anyway, this was a long one. And as usual, I'm not going to do any post-processing on it because I didn't have any times where I was like, oh, I should go back and re-say that. So if you've gotten this far, I hope you enjoyed my rant. I would say give this guy a follow. Like, he wrote some interesting stuff, right? I don't disagree with a lot of his points. So yeah, seems like a pretty cool dude to check out. Have a good one, folks. See you next time.